This is episode 5 of the Operation Paragon podcast. I am your host, Gabriel Schickler, and today we are doing a standalone Soapbox episode where I dive into creating your vision, so really what it is, and then how we can put it into practice and make it something that's actually achievable and doable. Before we get into that, I just have a couple quick announcements for the show. The first is that in the past couple weeks, I have had the honor of having on, at this point, over half a dozen amazing guests, so I have a huge backlog of interviews that I'm very excited to share with you guys. A lot of very different perspectives. Some people I agree with on things, some people I don't, but fascinating conversations, so stick around for those. We talk about all things from making money, entrepreneurship, dating, philosophy, all sorts of things. So very interesting topics and guests that we've had so far, and like I said, I'm very excited to share those with you guys. The second thing is that I wanted to reiterate the purpose of these Soapbox episodes just so it's clear, right? I am not building this podcast or this brand to put myself out there as some kind of guru. I am well aware of the fact that I am very early in my journey, and I have no delusions of grandeur, and I also don't have a very high opinion of people that will, get into these spaces and then pretend they know everything about everything, like you just started a business or you read about starting a business and so suddenly you're the expert on business, right? That doesn't make sense. And so similarly, I am not making these episodes as a way to definitively say, like, you must do these things or you won't see success in these areas or anything like that. I am simply sharing my experience and my journey and my path, hoping that you guys get some value out of them and then you can shortcut things and skip the mistakes that I have made along the way. And I'm sure, in the coming years, as I grow and develop as a person, there will be more of a foundation of sorts for making these more authoritative statements. But for the moment, like I said, I am just getting started. And so take everything that I say with a grain of salt, use your brain, draw your own conclusions. I have no interest on this podcast of telling you what to think. I simply want to give you guys resources and information that you can use to broaden your perspective and then make an informed decision yourself. So with that said, let us get into the episode. The first question that we have to ask is, why does a vision matter? Because it takes a lot of mental energy, a lot of focus. Can't you just spend that better elsewhere? And the answer for this is that maybe a vision doesn't matter to you. But if you look at a bell curve, chances are, if you don't have a vision for your life, then you are going to wind up somewhere in the middle, around the average, just statistically, everything else being equal. Nobody, at least nobody that I know, maybe you're completely different, nobody that I know wants what's considered an average life. A lot of people might want a normal life, as in a calm life, a peaceful life, a collected life, a predictable life. And those aren't necessarily bad things in and of themselves. But the fact of the matter is that average life, if you look at, the state of the country and the world today, you're heavily in debt, you have very little control over things, you're probably working a job more to make ends meet than actually something that interests you or that you want to pursue a life as a lifelong passion, and all these different things. And so having an average life is really not something that many people will say they want. And some people will say, no, I'm perfectly fine with an average life. Ask yourself genuinely, are you saying that because you feel attacked? Are you saying that because you're genuinely at peace with where you are? Or are you saying that because you've let yourself get complacent and comfortable with where you are and you don't want to put in the effort to move to the next level? I don't know you. I have no idea. But those are the obvious options that I see for the answer to that question. So if you want to get better than average outcomes, which I would assume if you're listening to this, you probably do, it's imperative that you craft a vision. Because if you don't live intentionally, then you're just going to end up going with the flow. And the people, the talking heads, the powers that be, the forces that control the different worlds, governments, political organizations, and just other institutions that influence public opinion, they have made their decisions of how your life is going to go, and the things that they want to do to try to influence you to be that way, right? So they want you to be broke, they want you to be sick, they want you to be fat, so you're reliant on the system, you don't have a lot of personal power, all these different things that are all very important to have as men. So, if you do not live an intentional life, you will end up following the script that they have written for you. And I think we would all agree that script does not end in a place that any person realistically wants to be. So, how do you break out of this? You create a vision. You live your life intentionally. And for all of us, on the younger side of things that don't have an established, like we're not married, we don't have a ton of kids yet. Maybe, you're a new parent and you're just getting started. You're, in college, before college, even after college, trying to figure out what you want to do, just feeling kind of lost and overwhelmed in the world. The first thing that is very important to recognize is that this point in human history has more opportunity in every single area of life than has ever been available. Just a few hundred years ago, if your father was, let's say, a carpenter, you would probably pick up the family trade and be a carpenter. Now, your father can be a carpenter, and you can go work for NASA, you can be a foreign ambassador, you can start your own business and go from, living in a trailer park to, making hundreds of millions of dollars a year, as we see in cases of, people like Andy Frisella, Bedros Cooley, and a lot of these other high-profile entrepreneurs. And so there's so many possibilities that are open to us now that it's very paralyzing because we have so little direction with what we want. And this makes a vision even more important because it's up to you to really decide what fits your character and your interests and your disposition and your skills, what you're interested in developing, and then what you want to stay away from. And nobody can give you that answer. People can only tell you how to get to a place that they have gotten, right? If somebody has hiked a trail before and you're like, hey, I need a map, you're probably going to trust them when they give you directions. If somebody has, if you want to, hike the Grand Canyon and you walk into somebody and someone's like, oh yeah, I read a book about the Grand Canyon once. It has rocks and stuff and you should walk this way and do that. You're probably not going to trust them as much. So that means that at the end of the day, you are the ultimate authority on your life. You can absolutely take advice from other people, learn things from people ahead of you, but it all comes down to you ultimately. So, what you think about, this is one of the basic principles, what you think about draws more of that thing into your life. And the reason for this is psychological. So, your conscious mind processes about 5% of what happens every day, and your unconscious mind processes the other 95%, which means it's all getting filtered through your subconscious, right? But you only consciously recognize a very, very small portion of that. And so the way your brain filters out what is what's important enough to have that 5% of your focus purely depends on what you have told your brain is important. So if you look around in your environment right now and you look for everything that's red, things that have a red coloration probably, stick out. You like just take a second here, count all the things that are red, right? I see some spines on a book over here, a set of dice I have. There's a little shutter on a little kid's playhouse thing over here that I can see. That's about it in this room. Cool. So you counted the red things. There's also a couple shirts in the closet. You've seen all the red things in the room. Now tell me the number of things that were blue. You have no idea because you weren't looking for them, right? And so what you tell your brain is important is the things that your brain will fixate on and give you more of. And so if you are, for example, looking for reasons to be dissatisfied with your life, reasons that you're broke, that you're powerless, your brain is going to generate those answers. If you flip that and you look for reasons that you have influence in your life, you can change your circumstances, you have potential to make a lot of money, for example, your brain is going to start feeding you options and reasons to do that, right? And so curating a vision will really give you that clarity so you know what you want to focus on, not what you should focus on. This is very important. What you want to focus on. Because if you say should, that's implying some kind of outside obligation. Now, you definitely should focus on certain things and should not focus on other things if you want a certain outcome. That's undeniable. But what that outcome is completely up to you. So if somebody tells you, you shouldn't focus on all the negativity in the world, it's just going to drag you down. Well, maybe you want to get into politics, for example. You're going to have to know what's going on with the state of the world. So all this advice is very circumstantial, and you need to consider that. And what ultimately becomes important to you is going to be determined by your vision and you living intentionally. And so as you deliberately focus on things, your brain is going to draw your attention to that more. And then the more attention you give to something, the more it comes into your life. If you focus on giving everything you can into a relationship with your girlfriend, for example, that relationship is going to improve and it's going to get better, and you're going to keep reinforcing this positive feedback loop because you've been clear, hey, I want to have a good relationship with this woman, so I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and then it just compounds over time. And so the idea of creating a vision and going beyond the present moment and saying, I want this future objective, is incredibly important, because what it does is it familiarizes that experience to your brain. So just by default, we are creatures of habit. One of the hardest things to do is to live in a way that's not in alignment with what our baseline is. And so if you can imagine things and envision them in your brain, your mind actually can't differentiate that experience from what happens to you in reality. So if you are, let's say, a professional athlete, you're a track runner, you want to hit this time, you have a much better chance of making progress if you can picture yourself in as much detail as possible, using all the senses you can, what it feels like to push and push and push and push and finally get that time and win first place, in your division, all these different things. If you picture that, it becomes familiar to your brain. And when it becomes familiar to your brain, it becomes the standard. And when it's the standard, then it's just naturally what happens. And so that is the ultimate goal of a vision. Now, a lot of times when you hear about things like, visualization, manifestation, all these different things, you think to yourself, I live in a world that is scientific, and this sounds like a bunch of woo-woo new age bullshit, and I have no interest in actually pursuing any of this. There is definitely a way to take this to an excess. But the fact of the matter is, there are forces that exist in the world, and they don't care if you believe in them or not. They simply are. So physics. If you have a bowling ball that you're holding over your foot and you let go of the bowling ball is probably going to crush your toes. You can't say, oh no, I don't believe in gravity. That's not going to affect me that way, right? It's the same principle. There are not just natural forces, as in forces that we can measure, but there are also forces, powers of the mind, right? There's no way to quantify somebody's thoughts. Like you can register the brain activity, you can measure their IQ, but the thoughts and the spirit and the soul are in a completely different realm from the physical, and so we can't use the physical to gauge it, right? And so there are all these forces and influences that people really aren't good at harnessing, especially because we're so focused on science, so we're so focused on the physical world around us, we forget about, spiritual disciplines, mental disciplines, things like that. And I have a story to kind of back this up here. Nikola Tesla once said, if you want to find the secret to the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. You say someone has good vibes. What does that mean? As far as I can tell, that's just short for, good vibration, bad vibration. Good impressions, bad impressions, right? And there's not really a way to quantify that because maybe you don't have the physical evidence, at least not in your conscious mind, but you've still picked up on something, right? So, for example, I crafted a vision board of sorts for last summer, and I put on all these different things that I wanted to achieve, and I did this visualization exercise, and I kind of looked through it. One of the things that was on that vision board was, making enough money to get a plane ticket to go visit my girlfriend and meet her family. I hadn't done this yet because they live across the country, and so obviously I can't just casually take a weekend and drive out there or anything. So this was a very big goal of mine. It was pretty pricey, and I, didn't really have the income to do it, and so that's why I put it on this board. Of all of the things that I had on there, that was the one, for some reason, in my mind, it was so much clearer than the other things. It was like, yeah, it would be nice to, buy this game that I had really fond memories of when I was a kid and play through it with my brothers. That didn't happen. I wanted to get a rifle. I wanted to get a car. I wanted to put a certain, get my own car, and all that. I wanted to put a certain amount of money into savings. None of these things happened because they were goals, but they weren't really crystallized. But with this plane ticket, I could feel the paper that it was on, how it's like that kind of papery feeling and it has that plastic kind of film on it. I could feel the ticket in my hand. I could see myself getting onto the plane. I could smell the plane, like just how all planes smell, and how it was cold because the air conditioning was on, and I could feel the clothes on my back and the bags that I had with me and all these different things. And so it was so much more vivid than all of the other things that were there. And then lo and behold, I get to the end of the summer. The only thing that I achieved was the thing that had really meant something to me. And I've been very deliberate about and kind of crafting into my vision. And I don't think that that's a coincidence in any way, shape, or form. So that alone, is proof that what you focus on and what you really give your attention to is going to come into your life. So the question then becomes, okay, let's assume, as I've said, the vision is important and how you see yourself in your future is going to influence your life. How do you do that? That's still an enormous problem, an enormous question. The first step is to just get very clear and very honest with what you want. And there are two parts to this. Part one is you need to find a way to quiet the noise. So get rid of the influences of your friends, your parents, gurus on the internet telling you that, you need to make $10K a month or you're not shit. All these different things. You need to have the clarity to just sit in silence away from all these influences and genuinely ask yourself, what is it that I want to do with my life? And it's only when you find your own voice that you will be able to figure out what you really want. Because all the things that you're told you should want, maybe they look attractive, but then you look at the work that's involved and you say, maybe not, that's not for me. So you need to find something that has actual significance and resonance with you specifically. And a really good exercise for this is called the 7 levels of why. This is something a mentor had me do a long time ago. And it's very simple, but it gets very profound. So what you do is you say, well, what do I want? And you come up with some kind of answer. Let's say, I don't know, I want to buy a Porsche. Okay. Why do you want to buy a Porsche? And you ask why, and you go 7 levels deeper than that surface level. And for whatever reason, just psychologically, doing this 7 times will get you to the bedrock foundation of what it is you really want. So in this example, I want to buy a Porsche. Okay, why is that? Well, I want to be liked and respected. I want people to take me seriously. And then you say, okay, well, why do you want to be liked and respected? Well, because, when I was a kid, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I got picked on. People didn't like me. And so I want to prove that to myself. Okay, why do you feel you need to prove that to yourself? And, it just goes on from there. And you get deeper and deeper and deeper until you find something that's of actual substance and means something to you. And so the first one, right, get very clear on what you want. I highly recommend writing it out physically so you can get your thoughts on paper and start, just analyzing it from a more objective perspective instead of having a bunch of thoughts rocketing around your brain all at once. The second part is you have to make sure that the vision is for you. Like I said, you want to still the voices from other people, but it's also crucial that this isn't something that you just say you want. This needs to be something that gets you excited, or you won't have the commitment to stick with it because it doesn't ultimately mean anything to you long term. Like I said, you look at the work and you say, maybe not. But if something really means something to you, you're going to be willing to push through any obstacle that is in your way to get that. So I was recently reading Winning by Tim Grover. If you don't know him, he trained Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, pretty sure LeBron, a lot of the greats in basketball. And his whole thing is just what it takes to win at the ultimate level. How to get to a level where you are beyond everybody else, and then to keep charting that unknown territory so you can go even higher. So he is all about winning, and just like the obsession of it. The book obviously is called Winning. And I want to read a quotation from him that I thought was very interesting here. So this is in a chapter that's titled Winning Belongs to Them, and it's your job to take it. So it's about competition. Competition tells you what you really want. It responds to your desires, your emotions, your instinctive craving, so much that you'll crawl through hell and back to get the thing you crave. You don't even have to think about it, you just know, that is mine. The reality of competition is this: to achieve at the highest level, you have to crave the end result so completely that nothing else matters. And you have to crave it for yourself, not for anyone else. You can't lose weight for anyone else. You can't build a business for anyone else. You can't win a championship for anyone else. If it doesn't burn within you to do it, you can't succeed. If your business is stagnant, if your results are weak, if you're not growing toward your goals and potential, there may be a reason that's not what you think it is. Because when you find the challenge you truly want to compete for, nothing and no one will be able to stop you. That was really powerful because when I was first reading this, I was like, well, what do you mean it has to be for you and not for anyone else? Like, isn't that selfish? But if you think about it, and as he explained in that passage, go back and listen to it if you want to hear it again. You can't force other people to get results in their lives, but you can take the steps that are necessary to get it done in your own. And so you need something that you can really latch onto that really means something so that, as he said, nothing and no one will be able to stop you. So that is step 2. Make sure that it's really for you. And don't overanalyze it either. Trust your gut, but make sure it's for you. Third is to visualize. So as with the ticket story, right? It was just incredibly vivid. I was there. I could see it. I could feel it. I could smell it. It was so real to me in my mind that I was able to make that happen. When you are visualizing things, you don't just say, oh yeah, that would be nice. You need to sit down and ask yourself, okay, how is it going to feel to be in that position? What are the sounds going to be around me? What are the people going to look like? What is this experience going to be? Because you need to make it real enough that your brain can believe it. Because again, it can't distinguish between imagination and reality. So what you experience in imagination, you experience also in reality. You can think about this with something like, reading a good book or watching a good movie. The story probably didn't actually happen, but it still has an emotional impact on you. It's very much the same principle here. And then you need to repeat that enough that you build the habit of doing it. And the reason that making it vivid is so important is because you need to create an emotional attachment. And I've tried to visualize a lot of things recently that have not worked out. And up until just the past week or so, I was really kind of hung up on, why isn't this working for me? What am I doing wrong? And I realized in my head, I was saying, oh yeah, it would be nice to make more money. It would be nice to get in better shape, all these different things. But I hadn't sat down and said to myself, okay, how is my life going to change if I make more money? What opportunities is that going to open up for me that don't exist now? How is it going to feel to be that person? And then once you get on that energetic level, that allows you to broaden your perspectives, believe it's possible, and then take action toward its achievement. And that's a huge difference, because it really lands in your being as opposed to just being something vague in this intellectual world where you can say, oh yeah, that would be nice. Cool. And then just kind of move on and forget about it. And so you need something that has that emotional attachment for you, or it's just not going to happen. So, all that. And then as I said, fourth step, you need to take action. You need to, first off, repeat the visualization so that you can stay focused on what it is you ultimately want and not get lost in the weeds of the day-to-day minutia. But you also need to do as much as possible to get you closer to that point. It's not enough to just, sit around for an hour a day and think happy thoughts about how you want your life to go. You actually need to take action on moving your life forward because nobody else is going to do that for you. And then the fifth and final step is to remember your why to keep going. So again, repeat the visualization, keep that focus, keep reminding yourself why you're pushing through it. And if you ever start to, encounter resistance, difficulty, you want to give up, that's normal. That's part of the process. Ask yourself why that is, look into it. And if maybe that thing that you're pushing for isn't meaningful enough to you, but if you have found a genuine purpose in your life and a genuine mission that you want to pursue, it will be enough, and you simply need to remind yourself of that. So, to recap, to craft your vision, you need to get extremely clear on what you want. You need to make sure it's for you. You need to visualize it and make it as real as you can in your own head. And then you need to take action to take that thought and make it a reality. And finally, you need to remember why you're on that path and to keep going no matter what. So just a couple closing notes. Again, I cannot stress enough, it must mean something to you for it to happen. And you need to make it as real as possible or it's not going to. And finally, you need to be ready to fight for it, because that is the only way that anything is going to happen. So I hope you guys have enjoyed my spiel today on visualization and how you can take it into your own life, craft your vision. And again, as I said at the beginning, this is a learning process for me. I am not claiming to do this perfectly, but I can promise you this has worked in my life. A lot of, high profile entrepreneurs, people that I really look up to, and you probably do as well, swear by this method. And so it might seem a little weird at first. I highly encourage you, give it a shot, just for a couple months, see how your life changes. If you're actually genuinely applying it, see what happens, put it into practice, and let me know, what your experiences are, if you have anything you would add on to this conversation, if maybe I'm completely full of shit and none of this is real. Let me know. But I would love to hear from you guys. Hope you've enjoyed this episode. This has been episode 5 of the Operation Paragon podcast. If you want to get in touch with me, you can hit me up in the DMs at Operation Paragon on Instagram or Operation Paragon podcast at gmail.com. I will have another interview episode dropping very soon for you guys, within the next few days here. And until then, remember, greatness is within your reach.